Imagine a country fractured by decades of conflict, waking up to find a piece of its coastline promised away in a secret agreement. This is Somalia's reality in early 2024, after a deal signed quietly in Addis Ababa sent shockwaves across the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia, landlocked for over 30 years, struck a deal with Somaliland, a self-declared state unrecognized internationally, offering Ethiopia coveted access to the sea. In return, Somaliland was promised a path to international recognition. For Mogadishu, this was a profound betrayal and a threat to Somalia's sovereignty, igniting a diplomatic storm that pulled in neighbors and global powers. The fate of Somalia and the region now hangs in the balance, shaped by the fallout from this one controversial deal. The Memorandum of Understanding, signed on January 1, 2024, between Ethiopia and Somaliland, sent shockwaves throughout the Horn of Africa and beyond. The announcement caught regional leaders, analysts, and citizens by surprise, sparking immediate debate and concern over its implications. Under the deal, Ethiopia would lease a 20-kilometer stretch of Somaliland's strategic coastline for 50 years. This agreement would allow Ethiopia, a landlocked nation, to finally establish its own naval base and a commercial port, granting it direct access to the Red Sea and global trade routes for the first time in decades. In return, Somaliland was promised a stake in Ethiopian Airlines, Africa's most successful carrier, and, perhaps most significantly, the tantalizing prospect of formal recognition, something Somaliland has sought since declaring independence in 1991. Somalia's government in Mogadishu reacted with outrage, immediately declaring the deal null and void. Officials called it a blatant violation of Somalia's sovereignty and territorial integrity, warning of serious consequences for regional stability. The timing was especially dramatic. Just days earlier, Somalia and Somaliland had agreed to resume long-stalled talks in Djibouti, raising hopes for peaceful dialogue. Now that fragile progress was shattered by this unexpected and secretive pact. The international community was caught off guard, with diplomats scrambling to respond. Many were forced to weigh the interests of a key regional power against the principles of international law and the sanctity of borders. By dealing directly with Somaliland, Ethiopia openly challenged the foundations of the African and global state system, raising questions about the future of unrecognized states and the rules that govern international relations. The move triggered a complex legal and diplomatic crisis, with alliances, loyalties, and long-standing partnerships suddenly thrown into uncertainty. Regional organizations and global powers began urgent consultations to assess the fallout. As tensions mounted, the entire region braced for the unpredictable consequences of a deal that had truly shaken a nation, and perhaps the entire Horn of Africa. Ethiopia's need for sea access is existential. Without it, the country faces significant logistical and economic challenges. Since losing its coastline in 1993, it's relied on Djibouti for nearly all trade, a costly vulnerability that hampers its economic growth and increases dependency. Securing its own port is central to Ethiopia's security and economic ambitions. It would not only reduce costs, but also enhance its strategic autonomy. For Somaliland, the deal is a gamble for long-sought recognition and a place on the world stage. It's a bold move to assert its independence and legitimacy. Somaliland has built a functioning state since 1991, but remains unrecognized by the international community, making this deal a potential game changer. For Somalia, the agreement threatens national unity and sets a dangerous precedent for fragmentation. It fears that recognizing Somaliland could encourage other regions to seek independence. If Somaliland can make international deals, other regions might follow, risking Somalia's disintegration and further destabilizing the region. The stakes are high: Ethiopia's ambition, Somaliland's quest for legitimacy, and Somalia's fear of collapse have created a zero-sum game where every move is critical. What one side sees as opportunity the other sees as aggression, making the situation even more volatile and complex. This is more than a commercial deal. It's a direct challenge to the political map of the Horn of Africa, with implications that could reshape the region. The outcome will shape the lives of millions, influencing their future and the stability of the entire region. Mogadishu's response was swift, recalling its ambassador, closing Ethiopian consulates, and passing a law nullifying the deal. Ethiopia downplayed the crisis, insisting the MOU was a commercial partnership, not a land grab. But Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's earlier hints at using force for sea access fueled regional fears. The fallout has strained security cooperation, especially in the fight against al-Shabaab, as mistrust poisons joint operations. Al-Shabaab has exploited the rift, using it as propaganda to rally support. Eritrea sided with Somalia, while Djibouti, whose port economy is threatened, found its mediator role compromised. The Horn of Africa is now in diplomatic flux, with shifting alliances and the risk of wider conflict growing. Regional stability is at stake, and the crisis has left the region on edge. The world is watching closely. Beyond politics, the deal has upended daily life in Berbera and along the coast. Traders and port workers face uncertainty. Some hope for jobs, others fear displacement by Ethiopian companies. Local businesses worry about losing their place, and families in the designated area fear forced relocation. Generations with deep ties to the land now face losing homes and livelihoods, feeling like pawns in a geopolitical game. Humanitarian aid is at risk, as political turmoil complicates access in a region already vulnerable to drought and food insecurity. The prospect of a foreign military base brings new fears. Residents worry their community could become a target in future conflict. Heightened rhetoric and instability have created an atmosphere of anxiety and fear. For ordinary people, the abstract struggle over sovereignty means real threats to safety and stability. The crisis quickly drew in global and regional powers, turning a local dispute into a geopolitical chessboard. Somalia rallied support from the Arab League, led by Egypt, which saw an opportunity to pressure Ethiopia. Turkey, a key Somali ally, stepped in to mediate, but its close ties to Mogadishu made Ethiopia wary. The US, UK, EU, and others called for respect for Somalia's sovereignty while urging dialogue, careful not to alienate Ethiopia. The Gulf of Aden's strategic shipping lanes raised the stakes. Instability here threatens global trade. The world cannot ignore the dispute. A local crisis could have far-reaching consequences. The region's alliances are shifting, and the risk of escalation is real. The Horn of Africa has become a test for international diplomacy. The outcome will reverberate far beyond its borders. Mediation efforts, especially by Turkey, have stalled. Talks broke down over irreconcilable positions. Somalia demands Ethiopia rescind the MOU before any dialogue. Ethiopia refuses, unwilling to accept diplomatic defeat. For Somalia, even discussing the deal legitimizes it, an unacceptable risk to sovereignty. Ethiopia insists the MOU is a legitimate framework for future partnership, not to be abandoned. The result is a frozen conflict. The deal exists on paper, but can't be implemented, and relations remain broken. This impasse blocks progress on security and economic cooperation, leaving the region vulnerable. The core issue, sovereignty versus strategic ambition, remains a zero-sum game. Without a dramatic shift, the crisis will fester. The Horn of Africa remains trapped in diplomatic deadlock. As 2025 draws to a close, the Horn of Africa stands at a crossroads, facing three distinct and consequential futures. The decisions made in the coming months will have a profound impact, not only on the region, but on the wider world. The first possible future is one of compromise. In this scenario, Ethiopia decides to annul the controversial memorandum of understanding, and a new, regionally supported agreement is forged. This deal would grant Ethiopia the port access it needs for economic development, while fully respecting Somalia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Such a solution would require difficult negotiations, but it could set a powerful precedent for peaceful conflict resolution in Africa. If this path is chosen, the region could see a new era of stability, economic growth, and increased cooperation. Trade could flourish, infrastructure could improve, and the lives of millions could be transformed for the better. The second possible future is a continued stalemate. Here, the MOU remains in place but is never put into action, leaving Somaliland in a state of uncertainty and the region mired in political tension. This unresolved situation would keep the status quo with no clear path forward. In this scenario, security cooperation between nations would suffer, trust would erode, and the ever-present risk of conflict would continue to cast a shadow over the Horn of Africa. The third and most dangerous path is one of military escalation. If Ethiopia attempts to enforce the deal by force, it could trigger a devastating war, drawing in neighboring countries and causing widespread suffering. Such a conflict would not only destabilize the Horn of Africa, but could also threaten global shipping lanes, disrupt international trade, and create a humanitarian crisis that reverberates far beyond the region. The world must pay close attention, because the choices made now will shape not just Somalia's future, but the fate of the entire region and the security of global interests. This is a critical test of international law, regional stability, and the world's commitment to peace and security. The stakes could not be higher, and the consequences will be felt for generations to come. The next chapter for the Horn of Africa is being written right now, and its outcome will echo across the continent and the world.